Have you ever wondered what would happen if one day you lost everything, your parents, your home, and your faith in the only family you had left? Today's story isn't just a quest for justice after a family tragedy, it's also a journey of growing up in the midst of pain, doubt, and the most brutal betrayal imaginable coming from your own flesh and blood. If you've ever thought that tragedy only happens in movies, listen to this story to the end. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't loss itself, but realizing you have no one left to trust, not even the brother you once loved most. Ban Jan Noi. Chapter 1. The day my family fell apart. You never forget the moment when all the peace in your life suddenly shatters. For me, it was that morning when I got a call from the police, still in my old pajamas, standing silently by the window, looking out at my mom's flower garden. Just one phone call and my world was split in two before and after losing my parents. I don't remember how long I screamed and cried. The questions kept repeating in my head. Why my parents? Why now? Just as they'd finally started thinking about themselves taking a vacation after years of hard work, I was only 15 at that age. You think tragedies only happen in movies, but real tragedy had come knocking at my door. My parents died of carbon monoxide poisoning while vacationing in Hawaii, leaving me alone in a house that suddenly felt cold and empty. 2 days later, my brother Jake showed up. We hadn't been close for 7 years, only seeing each other on holidays. I remember the awkwardness when he walked in. He wasn't the rebellious college kid who spent all day gaming anymore. He was now the only adult left in my family. He pulled me into a rushed hug, his breath tinged with energy drinks and airport fast food. I know this is really hard, but I'm your family now. We'll get through this. Okay, he said, his voice firm like he'd been preparing for the role of guardian for a long time. But the emptiness only grew. The house was the same mom's coffee mug still in the dishwasher, dad's reading glasses still on his nightstand, the dining room table still set with 3 place settings, but nobody used them. I still set out 3 dinners, one for dad, one for mom, one for me, even though I knew no one was coming back. Jake quickly took over everything. He moved back into his old room, set up a brand new computer for his streaming channel, sold mom's car because we don't need 2 cars anymore. Dad's entire home office got turned into a studio for Jake's Twitch channel. And me, I quietly helped him pack away family mementos into boxes and tried to hold myself together. There were times I thought at least I still have family, even if it's just the two of us. Everyone around me said the same thing, that I was lucky to have a responsible older brother instead of going into foster care or living with strangers. But I started to realize luck is a fragile thing, and sometimes family can feel even colder than loneliness. Never before had I felt so lost in my own home. Even though Jake tried to act strong, I always sensed something was off, a vague unease that kept growing inside me, as if behind that good brother mask was a truth I hadn't figured out yet. And I had no idea this was just the beginning of the darkest days of my life. Chapter 2. When Family Becomes a Stranger. The first weeks after the funeral passed by in a half-awake, half-dreaming state. I still went to school, still greeted my teachers, still pretended to be normal with my friends, but inside I was empty. Jake handled all the legal paperwork, quickly securing legal guardianship over me. He liked the feelings of being the pillar of the family, sometimes acting extremely responsible, but there was something about the way he managed our new life that unsettled me, though I couldn't quite name it. In the very first week, Jake sold mom's car. "You don't need to go anywhere much. The bus is enough," he said, eyes never leaving his computer screen. I didn't argue. I was too tired to fight, telling myself maybe he just wants to save money. But then came the smaller things. Jake canceled all the therapy sessions mom had already scheduled for me. Talking to strangers about our family isn't going to help. Strong people get through things on their own. I swallowed my tears, comforting myself that he's grieving too. Maybe he just wants what's best for me. Jake started turning the house into his own territory. Dad's office became a streaming room, cameras, LED lights, gaming consoles everywhere, the keyboard glowing like a cyber cafe. He would live stream for hours, his laughter shouts and cursing at games echoing through the whole lower floor. Every night I slept alone, listening to his voice, drifting down, feeling like there were two completely separate worlds under one roof. I tried to be good, did my homework by myself, cleaned the kitchen, even defended Jake when teachers called to check on us. Once I overheard a teacher say, "You're lucky to have such a mature, older brother." I just forced a smile, wondering if they noticed I was slowly disappearing inside my own home. That feeling of unease kept growing. Jake started keeping track of every single expense. I had to take pictures of every bill, even for school supplies or snacks at the cafeteria, and send them to him. He said it was to manage the family budget, but to me it felt like he was managing me. Jake rarely went out. Most of the time his door was locked, only coming out to eat when it was convenient, then retreating back to his screen. Maybe the worst part was that I had no one to really talk to. Aunt Sarah, Mom's younger sister, would call to check in, but her comfort was always the same empty phrases. "Jake's a good guy. You're lucky, just hang in there." Okay, I wanted to tell her how abandoned I felt about how Jake was controlling everything, but she cut me off. "He probably just wants the best for you. A man has to carry the family, now try to understand him." Friends at school gradually drifted away too. Some started looking at me like I was that weird orphan girl, only making small talk. No one really wanted to hear what was actually happening. I drowned in loneliness. No one seemed to notice how hard I was struggling beneath the okay mask I put on. Every night, even though I knew no one else would be eating with me, I still set out 3 sets of dishes on the table out of unconscious habit, as if by keeping 3 places, I could hold on to Mom and Dad just a little longer. Jake would just shake his head and tell me I was being childish. It was then I truly realized losing your parents is a huge shock. But living with a relative you no longer recognize, that's the kind of wound that never heals. And I also started to understand if I didn't save myself, no one else would do it for me. Chapter 3: Strange Signs and a Loneliness I Couldn't Name. Autumn drifted by like a long, cold, hazy rain. I lived quietly in the house that had once been filled with laughter, now heavy with silence. Jake grew increasingly distant, always busy with his streams and online calls with his new girlfriend Ashley, a trendy girl whose baby I love. He was a constant background noise, though she never once bothered to speak to me. Sometimes I felt like a shadow in my own home. Jake started changing even the smallest routines. For example, every night he would lock his office door. There were nights I walked past hearing low whispers and the rapid clatter of his keyboard, but the moment I touched the doorknob, everything inside fell silent. When I asked, he would only reply curtly, "Grown-up stuff you don't need to know." I tried to reclaim a sliver of normalcy by rummaging through Mom's old bookshelf, rereading stories she used to share with me as a child. Once I stumbled upon a thin folder in her desk drawer labeled Grief Camp for Teens, a support camp for teens who'd lost loved ones. The thought crossed my mind, maybe I should try reaching out. Maybe I could talk to people who truly understood how I felt. I brought the flyer down to the living room, hesitantly telling Jake I want to sign up for this camp. I think it would help me. He didn't even look up from his screen. That's the same time as Ashley's birthday. "I've got plans for Vegas, forget it. You can just stay home?" For the first time in months, I truly got angry. Mom said I could make my own decisions. I'm not just some piece of furniture in this house. Jake turned to look at me, eyes dark. "Mom's dead. You should learn to move on and stop bothering people." His words cut through me like a knife. That night I couldn't sleep at all. Tears soaked my pillow, and inside me was a nameless anger I really was all alone. I decided to call Aunt Sarah this time, determined to tell her the truth. But the moment I brought up Jake's neglect and controlling behavior, She cut me off. Sweetie, everyone's in shock after losing parents. Jake's suffering too. I trust him. You should listen to him. I hung up, realizing no one was on my side. Despair closed in. The final blow came when Jake secretly tossed the grief camp flyer into the fireplace right in front of me, as if to send a clear message. Everything in this house is under my control. I started sleeping fitfully, waking up in the middle of the night to strange noises downstairs, Jake whispering on the phone, the window creaking open, the sound of texts piling up. Whenever I asked, I was scolded for being paranoid, for imagining things. There were nights I stayed awake just to jot down every odd detail: who had called the house, which of Mom's things suddenly went missing, even the fact that Jake changed the Wi-Fi password and banned me from going online to help you focus on studying. That's when I realized if I didn't find out the truth for myself, no one would ever want to listen to me. In a house that grew more suffocating each day, I wasn't just an orphan, I was a prisoner, locked in by the only family I had left. Chapter 4: Secrets Behind Locked Doors. Ever since the night Jake tossed the grief camp flyer into the fireplace, everything in the house seemed to slip into a constant silent state of alarm. I realized I was living in a kind of nameless prison, where every move I made was watched and controlled, subtly but suffocatingly. Jake banned me from having my own phone, claiming it was to protect you from online scams. All my social media accounts, from Facebook to Instagram, were temporarily locked so you can focus on studying. That's when I truly realized I was being isolated from the world, not just emotionally, but physically as well. Every bit of spending money I received had to go through Jake. He justified it with that grown-up logic Mom always said: you have to manage your money. If you want something, tell me, and I'll decide. I tried asking Jake to send me the counseling appointments Mom had arranged, but he brushed me off. Stop digging up the past. It'll only make you weaker. The sense of confusion and anxiety inside me grew stronger every day. I started noticing Jake frequently rummaging through our parents' closets, checking documents, even taking away certain important things I couldn't quite identify. Once I secretly saw him taking photos of banking documents and emailing them somewhere. When I asked about it, he just smiled. I'm handling our family paperwork, that's all. But the unease kept growing. I began to secretly record everything strange: the times Jake went out and came home, the strangers who called the house, even how some valuable items like Dad's watch or Mom's silver bracelet suddenly disappeared. One day, I discovered a sealed envelope in Mom's desk drawer addressed to a law office in the city. On the outside, it read, "Open only in the worst-case scenario." My heart pounded, hands shaking as I decided to hide it away, for now not daring to open it yet. But everything came to a head when I accidentally overheard one of Jake's late-night phone calls. His voice was urgent, talking about debt, transferring money, and getting it done before the girl finds out. I stood outside my door, gripping the lock tight, and for the first time I was truly afraid of my brother. The next morning, I mustered all my courage to call Aunt Sarah, trying desperately to explain the strange things happening at home. She still insisted, "You're just overly sensitive from all the trauma," and told me to listen to Jake if I wanted peace in the house. The call ended with her saying, "You're lucky to have someone to take care of you over here. I see plenty of kids sent off to foster care." I sat frozen on my bed, the lawyer's letter still in my pocket. The feeling of being alone, of having no one to trust, only grew stronger. That night, I lay awake, heart pounding with resolve. I had to save myself, because no one else believed in what I was feeling anymore. Chapter 5: The Lawyer's Letter and Confessions from the Past. I never thought I'd have the courage to open that letter so soon. But the next morning, when Jake went out, probably to meet the person he called his financial advisor, I decided I couldn't wait another second. I pulled the curtains closed, locked my door, my heart pounding so loudly it felt like the whole house could hear it. The envelope was sealed with utmost care, my mom's familiar handwriting inscribing my name in the corner. I opened it with a mix of guilt and a desperate hunger for the truth. Inside was a handwritten letter, long, meticulous, saturated with Mom's worry and love. She explained that before their trip to Hawaii, my parents had discovered strange withdrawals from the family's accounts, odd shopping charges, and several overseas wire transfers under Jake's name. Mom wrote about how Jake had fallen into online gambling, borrowed recklessly, and had promised them he would stop, but always relapsed. She wrote, "My love, if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. No matter what, I want you to trust yourself. If you ever feel in danger, seek out Lawyer Peterson. He's the person your father and I trusted with all important documents and our will. All instructions are with him." I read every line with tears streaming down my face, overwhelmed by a mix of loss and suffocating suspicion. All the things I'd tried to convince myself were just my imagination turned out to be true. My parents weren't blind, and they hadn't ignored the warning signs from Jake as I'd once believed. They had tried to protect me, but fate simply hadn't been on our side. At the end of the letter, Mom reminded me always to keep an escape route, never place absolute trust in anyone, not even family, if I ever felt unsafe. Once I calmed down, I decided to contact the law office as the letter instructed. I pretended to ask Jake for permission to attend a tutoring class. On my way out, I headed straight for Mr. Peterson's office. He greeted me with both surprise and concern, then ushered me into a private room. Unlike Jake or Aunt Sarah, he listened to everything I said from my parents' death and Jake's frightening changes to the way I was being completely controlled. When I handed him Mom's letter, he read it slowly, nodding thoughtfully. Mr. Peterson opened his safe, pulling out a thick folder and a small, sealed envelope with both my parents' signatures. "Your parents left a supplementary will right before their trip. You have legal rights to all the family's assets on the sole condition that Jake completes treatment for his addiction and is not allowed to interfere in your life." He also showed me some evidence bank statements proving Jake had been secretly withdrawing money, a recording of my parents confronting Jake about their broken trust time, and again. Most importantly, he revealed that my parents had filed a report with the police about the suspicious withdrawals, but since there wasn't enough for a criminal case, everything had ended at an internal warning. Hearing all of this, I felt both terrified and a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone. My parents had prepared for this, and now I had the support of the only adult who truly understood what was happening. Leaving the lawyer's office, I knew from this day on I would no longer be the child who simply obeyed and endured. I would seek justice for myself and for my parents. Chapter 6. The Trap Turned and an Escape. Into the night. After my meeting with Lawyer Peterson, I returned home, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. All the secrets seemed to be coming to light, but that also meant I would have to face Jake head on, the person who was now not just my brother, but a real threat. Jake grew more and more out of control. Maybe he sensed that something was off about me. He started checking my phone every night, scrutinizing my class schedule, questioning my friends over text, even interrogating me about why I'd been out longer than usual. One night I caught Jake rummaging through my room, pretending to look for Mom's old medicine box. I stayed up clutching my phone and a scanned copy of Mom's letter, knowing that one careless slip and everything I had would be gone forever. During those days, I realized I couldn't keep enduring this. I reached out to Lawyer Peterson again, telling him about all the new warning signs from Jake controlling the finances, forcing me to stop seeing friends, even indirect threats about sending me to reform school if I didn't behave. Mr. Peterson was silent for a moment, then said bluntly, "You need to leave the house at the first chance you get. I'll coordinate with Child Protective Services. If Jake realizes you know his secret, it will be very dangerous." That very night, I packed a small backpack just in case I had to run at any moment. I stashed the important documents, a backup phone, and some cash in the bottom of my dresser, and then the thing I feared most happened. That night, just as I started to doze off, strange noises echoed from the hallway. Jake stood right outside my door, eyes bloodshot, voice trembling. "What are you doing behind my back? What are you hiding?" Are you trying to take everything from me? Before I could react, Jake burst into my room, tearing through my drawers, flinging my books and papers onto the floor. I was terrified, but I knew I couldn't be weak now. I broke free and ran from my room, wrestling with Jake in the hallway. In that chaotic moment, I managed to grab my phone and quickly dial Mr. Peterson's number on the backup device. I ran shouting, "Jake, don't force me to turn you in. You've got nothing left to lose, but I still have a future." For a moment, Jake froze, then suddenly started to cry, but his tears didn't move me anymore. I dashed out the front door, sprinting into the freezing night. Just as we'd arranged within minutes, a police car pulled up at the end of the street. I was taken to the Child Protective Services office while Jake was detained for questioning. All the evidence, bank statements, mom's letter, even fresh bruises on my wrist had been handed over to the police by my lawyer. That night, lying in the safe room at the shelter, I realized my life had changed forever. I was no longer the victim, backed into a corner. Now, I was the one turning the tables, and my journey for justice was only just beginning. Chapter 7: Justice at a Price. When family becomes a courtroom. The next morning, I was temporarily placed in the home of a retired teacher, Mrs. Chen, who was known for being strict but kind. Her house was small, peaceful, and always smelled faintly of jasmine tea. She told me, "Here you only need to be yourself. You don't have to force yourself to be strong." Those words almost made me cry after everything I'd just been through. But the shadow of Jake didn't let me go for a single moment. On sleepless nights, I'd lie still, imagining his heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway again. But this time, no one could force me back into my old fears. On the first day in court, Jake appeared in gray prison clothes, lightly handcuffed, but his eyes still burned with fire. He looked at me, not with the eyes of a brother, but like a true enemy. His lawyer argued that I was paranoid from losing my parents, while Jake performed his sacrificing big brother act. I had to recount every detail: how Jake controlled the finances, his threats, the violent episodes, even the way he cut me off from every other family member so I'd have nowhere to turn. Every word cut into me, but I knew the truth had to come out, even if it meant my family could never go back to how it was. Just as lawyer Peterson had warned, Jake didn't fight alone. He had a network of friends, neighbors, even old teachers willing to testify to his kind character. There were times I'd nearly gave up because so many people were willing to believe a liar, simply because he'd once helped them in some small way. But then I'd look at Mrs. Chen and see the steely determination in her eyes. She didn't say anything, just rested a gentle hand on my shoulder, as if to remind me, keep going. Justice has never been for the faint of heart. Every court session was a mental battle. Jake and his lawyer didn't just attack me with evidence, they twisted even the smallest details, dredged up the times I'd run away from home. Sad text messages from my past, making me out to be an unstable, troubled child. Every act of self-defense, every piece of evidence I brought, was spun and used against me. Sometimes I thought I had lost, but then an old friend of my mother, someone she had worked with, appeared with a journal Mom had left behind. In it, Mom wrote plainly about her fear of Jake, the need to keep a close eye on the family's health and finances, and her wish to protect me when things spiraled out of control. Those journal entries were like a final lifeline. The entire courtroom went silent as lawyer Peterson read aloud each trembling line in my mother's handwriting. For the first time, Jake finally began to break. He had nothing left to say, only bowed his head, his shaking hands gripping the edge of the defendant's stand. But even as justice tipped in my favor, I felt the pain that my family had to bear. One had lost their freedom, one had lost faith in blood, and one was gone forever. I wondered, was the truth really worth losing everything, or was this pursuit of justice just another tragedy? The trial was adjourned, pending further investigation, but I knew, no matter what the outcome, my life would never be the same. My family had fallen apart not because someone died, but because the truth finally spoke, and no one was brave enough to ignore it anymore. Chapter 8: The Survivor and the Price of Truth. The days that followed felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Staying at Mrs. Chen's house, I tried to live as normally as possible, but everything around me reminded me of the family I'd lost, not just my parents, but also the innocent version of myself. Sometimes I wondered if I hadn't searched for the truth, would everything have hurt? Less news of the case quickly spread throughout the town. I became the main character in endless gossip. Some people pitied me, some whispered and stared, others took to social media to defend Jake, calling me a troubled kid haunted by the past. Many days I couldn't even bring myself to leave my room, just curled up, reading mom's journal entries again and again to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't made it all up. But life had to go on. I tried to focus on my studies, though every time I opened a book, tears would fall. Mia, the only friend who stayed, would quietly eat lunch with me in the library, asking no questions, just silently sharing my sorrow. In those days, simply having one person truly listen made me feel not completely alone. Jake's trial unfolded just as lawyer Peterson predicted. He was convicted of intentional poisoning and asset embezzlement, but not of homicide, since the evidence about tampering with the heater was only enough for reckless endangerment, causing potential death. That verdict brought a sense of relief, but also a vague emptiness because part of me still wanted him to pay more. Yet seeing Jake standing silently in the courtroom, tears rolling down his cheeks, I knew I'd never feel fully satisfied. The court granted me early emancipation with Mr. Peterson as the trustee for my inheritance. I left Mrs. Chen's home for a small apartment, starting the life of an unwilling adult. At first, I'd still set out 3 plates at dinner out of habit, until I realized I was the only one sitting there in silence. Jake was sentenced to 15 years in prison, along with mandatory addiction treatment and psychological counseling. From prison, he sent me a letter, messy handwriting, full of regret, not asking for forgiveness, just hoping I'd live well. Hoping. I folded the letter, put it away in a drawer, not knowing when I'd have the courage to read it again. That spring, I graduated high school with honors and received a scholarship to a university 3 states away. No one from my old family showed up on graduation day, only Mrs. Chen and Mr. Peterson sat in the back row, clapping as I walked across the stage. I promised myself I'd build a new kind of family, smaller but honest, with nothing left to hide. Some days I still cry when I see my parents' old belongings still feel hollow walking past mom's garden, or when I accidentally hear an old song dad used to sing. But instead of running away, I choose to face it all, to let myself feel the pain, to forgive Jake, my parents, and myself. Now looking back, I understand that truth is never a perfect, happy ending. It's the start of a slow healing journey where pain and hope coexist. Maybe my family's gone, but I still have myself, and the belief that no matter how cruel the past was, I have the right to write a new chapter just for me. Chapter 9: Those Who Remain and the Question of Forgiveness. As life gradually returned to some semblance of normal, I realized that the deepest wounds don't always make the headlines or appear in court verdicts. They exist quietly in the stillness of the evening, with the ticking of the clock in a small apartment where only one person sighs. I was no longer the naive 15-year-old girl, nor the silent victim of a broken family. I became a survivor and a witness to the ugly truth about greed, betrayal, and the helplessness of adults. Strangely, I found myself thinking about Jake more often than I expected. Not with hatred, but with a kind of regret for an older brother who had once meant everything to me as a child. There were nights I'd wake up and wonder if somewhere in the prison, Jake ever remembered the peaceful days, the family dinners filled with laughter. I also wondered if given a second chance, would he choose the same path? After receiving Jake's handwritten letter, I tried many times to write back. Sometimes it was just a few lines asking how he was. Sometimes it was a whole page of pain and blame, which I'd end up deleting because I didn't know where to begin. Forgiveness, it turned out, isn't something that happens in a day, nor is it some grand gesture. Sometimes forgiveness is simply letting go enough to find a little more peace in your heart each day. Sometime later, I got news that Jake had been transferred to a compulsory mental health and addiction treatment center. The doctor sent updates on his progress, hoping I, as his only family, could provide feedback on his treatment plan or maybe even visit. I hesitated for a long time. The memory of that night, Jake unhinging my door, trying to pull me back as if he still had the right to control my life, still haunted me. But when I read his shaky apology, what I saw was the scrawny big brother from our childhood, the one who used to walk me home in the rain, who once protected me from bullies at school. In the end, I chose to send a short letter. I hope you truly change. I can't fully forgive you, but I don't want us to live forever in hatred. After sending it, I felt a little lighter. No one was forcing me to become a family with Jake again, but I knew that to move forward, I had to leave behind burdens that no longer belonged to me. On the outside, life continued. I found a part-time job at the university library, made some new friends, people who knew nothing of my tragedy and didn't care about anything but classes, movies, and late-night study coffees. Sometimes I'd talk about my old family as if it was a story from a far-off time, and all I got was a nod of understanding, none of the judgmental looks from before. I still visited my parents' grave on the anniversary of their passing. There was always a bouquet of white flowers from Jake beside the yellow ones I brought. Even though we never saw each other again, we remained connected by a pain that only we could understand. Maybe that's a kind of forgiveness that needs no words, just quietly existing, like how time itself heals the deepest wounds. By the end of this chapter, I realized after everything, the biggest thing left behind isn't justice, but the strength to keep living, to avoid becoming a copy of the past. I'm not sure what tomorrow will bring. I only know that today I am strong enough to keep writing my own life story without needing any perfect family ever again. Chapter 10. The Journey to Redefine. Family. A year passed after the final trial, and slowly my life found a new rhythm. I moved to another city, living in a small apartment, where my scholarship and the modest inheritance from my parents meant I didn't have to worry too much about rent each month. Every morning when I woke up, I tried to remind myself I was no longer Jake's victim. I was just a regular person starting over. I declared a major in psychology, maybe because deep down, I was still haunted by the question, what could turn a biological brother, the safest place in my childhood, into someone capable of destroying his own family? Every lecture on mental illness addiction and the cycle of dysfunctional families made me reflect more deeply on my own story. I often wondered if things might have turned out differently had someone intervened sooner. I realized that the deepest pain wasn't material loss or loneliness. It was the sense that everything I'd believed in family safety protection had been betrayed at its core. Yet that same harsh truth forced me to grow up and to rebuild what truly matters to me from the ground up. Gradually, I started opening up to the people around me. I joined a support group for people who had experienced loss and family abuse. There, I met people whose stories were even more painful than mine, those who lost parents in accidents, grew up in orphanages, or were betrayed by their own blood. We weren't victims. We were survivors finding ways to rewrite our own futures. At first, I only listened. Later, I started sharing my story, not hiding, not adding drama, just telling the truth. That kind of honest vulnerability helped me realize something: forgiving others can be hard, but forgiving yourself is often even harder. I forgave myself for believing in a perfect family, for being too weak once, for letting Jake control my feelings for so long. Jake still sent me letters from the rehab center. In the beginning, I didn't bother to read them, but slowly I learned to see those letters as part of the past, something that couldn't be erased but no longer had the power to hurt me. One day, I opened a letter and read about his group therapy, about taking responsibility in court, and his regret for our parents. When I finished, I felt no more anger, just a quiet sense of loss. Maybe the biggest lesson I learned from all of this is that real family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to stay. who choose to listen, who reach out their hand when you have nothing left to hold on to. For me, that was Mrs. Chin, Mr. Peterson, the new friends I met at university, the people who crossed my path and offered their hand at my weakest moments. I don't know what the future will bring, and I'm not sure I've fully overcome my past, but I know I'm not afraid anymore. I don't see myself as small and alone in my pain. If I once thought happiness meant having a perfect family, now I know it's simply about living as my true self, being free to love, and being brave enough to let go of what's already gone. When I placed flowers on my parents' grave for the second anniversary, I smiled softly. Beside my bouquet was Jake's bouquet of white flowers, and I knew that no matter where life took us, no matter how far apart, we still carried memories of each other, of a family that was once beautiful and once so sad. That's life, never perfect, but always giving us a chance to begin again. In the end, I realized some losses can never be made whole, and some wounds will follow us for the rest of our lives. But it was in those darkest moments that I found the strength to stand up to forgive and to keep living not for the past, but for the future I choose for myself. If you're going through dark times, remember that you are not alone. Life always gives us a chance to start over, whether it's with a new family, new friends, or simply with yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. If you see yourself in any part of this journey, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another true and haunting story on True Reddit Reads.